And welcome back. It's time for this week's Capitol Report with Pat McGuigan of CapitolBeatOK.com. Pat, the topic this week, pretty obvious, is the shutdown, the partial shutdown of the federal government. It's been the focus of every conversation. Walk us through what the impact is on this here in Oklahoma.
Yeah, pretty soon it's going to all be the debt ceiling,
right, that's right.
With shutdown in a close second, maybe. Well, the effect is pretty clear at Tinker because it's our largest federal employer, and it's kind of a mix of who's not reporting to work and who is. They did the essential versus non-essential definitions, and the military is getting paid. The civilian cash flow, if you will, for federal employees is certainly impeded. Federal employees across the state, many are impacted. Interesting story in the Oklahoman about nonprofits that are seeing their cash flow interrupted. The state as a whole, I did a report earlier this week, I think this is still the case, that the individual agencies have money paid forward, if you will. And so they're okay for now in terms of their regular functions. That actually kind of brings up an issue that I want to touch on briefly, and that is that Governor Fallon, back in the legislative session, she vetoed a bill Speaker Shannon had proposed, which was to require explicit, clear plans for reducing federal-related spending in the state agencies, going up to 25% reduction in federal spending. She didn't think that was necessary, and it's kind of interesting because the statement from Fallon administration officials and others in state government is, well, now we're looking at the effect. Well, I think that a pretty strong point Speaker Shannon had was, let's look at that when we're not in, this is not a crisis,
right, but
it's a challenge for the whole country and including Oklahoma. So anyway, that's an interesting issue that's not really a sidebar. It might have been better to have had a public plan, argue, cuss, and discuss it, and then be ready to implement it when the time comes. Having said all that, it's affected the honor flights that Gary Bands, state representative, has organized. He's getting some help in D.C. from James Langford, and you have to respect the members of the D.C. police force who are working despite the impact on them. Now, having said all that, you then you then incorporate reference to the Congress has proactively sought to finance directly certain functions, and the Obama administration is threatening to veto those, like support for veterans funding. And the reason is that they perceive, I believe, the Obama administration perceives that it has an advantage as long as this is all wrapped together and you're doing the Washington Monument strategy, of closing popular landmarks and national parks and so forth. So, but one of the things they wanted to fund was the D.C. government to keep essential functions going in D.C. So there you go.
How about the impact in other states or just generally across the nation?
It depends on those other states. Where there's a high proportion of the federal workforce that's not military related, it's having a quicker impact. You have functions like NOAA in Norman, the weather service that has continued to work. Essential core employees, they're still watching the radar and doing all of that work. To some extent, this is like, I don't want to inaptly mix metaphors here, but military veterans who have been in actual combat refer to the fog of war, meaning the confusion that happens when you're in the midst of an incredibly stressful situation. You might call this the fog of political war, because both sides in both directions are overstating the actual impact. The impact is not dramatic yet. I think when it could get real interesting is the debt ceiling vote, not that far away.
So in the time we have left here, can you make a prediction as to how long this could last, and how are they going to reach a compromise?
I think it may last a while. And the reason I think that is this is not a fight over political advantage. It's a fight about principle. President Obama wants to grow government. his opponents in the House of Representatives want to, at least over time, shrink government. They want to make the federal footprint, if you will, smaller, to use an environmental analogy. Any other outcome is business as usual. And the new normal is budget strife and stress all the time. Think about the last year. And that's where we are. And I think both sides are bringing differing, conflicting, clashing principles to bear. And that's why it's such a fundamental fight.
You read more about this and other topics at CapitolBeatOK.com. For Pat McGuigan, I'm Alex Cameron. Have a great day.